Hey guys, so I want to make a new video going over the Ritualist, the new 100th Ascendancy coming in 0.2. Now personally I believe this is probably the most overhyped Ascendancy I have seen. I want to talk about it all. Yeah, I honestly don't think it's that good unless it's like some extreme late game scenarios. Also have some PvPs as well. But yeah, so let's start. What is the Ascendancy? So this Ascendancy is pretty much focusing on like ring bonuses and like some headhunter buffs, which are kind of mediocre, and charms. Let's start with the ring slot. So the ring slot, before you get there, you have to take one negative small node. This can be reduce max mana, reduce spirit, or negative all res. So negative all res is not that bad. It's just one suffix on the ring slot that you're going to get for bonus. Reduce max mana also is not that bad. Reduce spirit is probably always bad. You probably need to take this. But yeah, the negative doesn't really matter all that much. You get +1 ring slot, and +1 ring slot as a Ascendancy node is definitely one of the best nodes in the entire game. And of course, the follow-up node you also get increased attributes 3%, pretty nice. And then 25% increased bonuses gained from equipped rings and amulets. This would also count the rings I just got. In total, this is 75% increased bonus from your rings essentially, and then 25% from your amulet in total. Effectively being like another slot gear piece. So you get one bonus ring slot, then like a pseudo like, fourth ring slot / amulet combined. But anyway, yeah, these two nodes are absolutely insane, are definitely the best Ascendancy nodes this Ascendancy has, and also some of the best Ascendancy nodes in the entire game. The issue relies in everything else. So we'll talk about it all first. Wildwood persistence, this 2-pointer right here, and a small node gives increased life recovery rate. So it gives you 5% increased life recovery rate per 5% of missing life. Early in the game, this node is just absolutely terrible. I don't even know what they can do in a new patch to make this even semi-useful. Maybe we have some like RF in the future or something, but it's really like no situation where you actually just know when it's actually going to be useful. So this node is just really mediocre. I definitely want to take this. Maybe, a new skill gem or something comes out and makes this useful. But yeah, currently it is not that good. These are probably the next two best nodes so far, and this is the charm wheel. So the small nodes give increased charm charges gained. And the first one is +1 charm slot and 20% more charges gained. So this is multiplicative with all your increased charges gained from charms on your skill tree or on your gear. Next node right after allows you to consume 25% of your max mana to trigger a charm if you don't have enough charges to consume it. So this is a pretty good node if charms were good in the current game. The issue right now, and as we do know, charms is pretty much terrible in the current game. You have Thorn Charm or Freeze Immune, that's probably the best one we have. All the other charms are really terrible. The clause here is that 0.2 is bringing unique charms. So the question is, are there actually going to be strong unique charms in 0.2, or are they still going to be terrible? And that really depends how strong the Ascendancy node is. But even then, for 4 points, these charms had to be absolutely insane to even like worth taking this at all. And also keep in mind the skill tree, you can already get +1 charm slot for 2 points. So Ascendancy node also being +1 charm slot really isn't like that amazing. 2 scope points is a lot less valuable than 2 Ascendancy points. Now I'll go on to the next nodes, and probably the worst nodes in the game is these like character buffs. So the first one is going to be Ritual Sacrifice, and adds to which is spammed. Ritual Sacrifice, what does this do? So it's a cooldown of 8 seconds, sacrifice the corpse of a rare monster to grant you its modifiers for duration. So the duration is pretty much 22 seconds with quality, and this takes about 4 seconds to activate. I count this in the video. It takes around like 3.5 to 4 seconds to sacrifice the rare monster, then you get the rare buffs, like 4 rare buffs. Now there's 2 things about this. One is the cooldown time. So there is no limit to this, so you can use this every 8 seconds to get more rare buffs and stack it on top. Now of course each rare buff has its own separate duration, so it's not going to go to like infinite buffs. And it does have the buff and duration tag. So this is 2 important factors. Because it has the buff tag and no spell and attack tags, there's really no way to speed the animation up. It's always going to be 3.5 to 4 seconds, which means this is going to be extremely slow and slow you down a ton in maps, to the point where I can't see this like ever being worth it unless hopefully they buff this animation before launch, for really just make it instant. It's currently at 3.5 to 4 seconds with no way to speed this up. It's just way too long. But it does have a duration tag, meaning you can scale the duration. You can get like 1 duration wheel on tree, use persistent support gem, and you can get like 40-second buffs. But still, 40-second buffs when you just spend like 4 seconds on a single rare monster to seal the buffs is really just not it. Like, we have Headhunter in the game, we know how strong these buffs are, and yeah, using a whole Ascendancy point for like 1/10 of a Headhunter is just not it. Now the next node is probably the worst node in the entire game, and is Ritual Sacrifice can be used on yourself to do 20% of your max life to grant a random monster modifier. A maximum of 1 modifier can be granted this way, Once again, this also has animation time that already makes it like really mediocre, but one singular hand to buff is terrible. So unnoticeable for the most part, unless he's still the strongest buff and there's like 80 different rare mobs or whatever, right? You can still sound like Shroud Walker, which just makes you teleport to monsters. It's very, very annoying. If you played with Hunter, you know exactly what Shroud Walker is. So yeah, you can steal buffs that actually are negatives, and then you have no way to remove them for 20 plus seconds. Yeah, this node is just absolutely terrible. Can you see you never taking this? Maybe you take Ritual Sacrifice and scale duration. Maybe you get a ton of duration, you get like 60-second hand debuffs. But even then, the animation with the 4-second casting of this is just really, really bad, and there's no way to speed up currently in the game. If they reduce this animation, if it's like 1 second, then maybe it could be nice, it could be playable. I wouldn't mind that. But yeah, currently as it stands, these just seem extremely bad. And then the last node, which is also not that good, is Corrupted Life Force. So go back over here real quick. Corrupted Life Force gives you a Blood Boil. Essentially, the TLDR, what this does, you can read it for yourself, but it's a debuff that applies to enemies, and it's a stacking debuff. And once you kill that enemy with the debuff on them, it will spread corrupted blood to all nearby enemies. Now, the issue with this is only ever useful if you have extremely slow clear speed. Because if you're killing monster packs at 1 to 2 seconds, this is pretty much never going to activate while mapping unless you have a very slow clear speed build. But even for like a dot build, it seems extremely mediocre, because unless we're spending like 5-8 seconds on like per pack, this just doesn't have the place in the current game. We'll have to be nerfed by like over 90% for this to maybe see some use, because currently rares and like white monsters die way too fast for this ever to be applied, for this ever to be useful. So yeah, not that good once again. Yeah, let's go back to the ring and amulet stuff. So the reason why I said this is one of the worst Ascendancies, or probably one of the biggest baits at the start of the league at least, is because the only thing you're really getting here is this +1 ring slot and the ring and amulet bonus. But you can't even utilize these until you have a ton of currency. Like, this is by far the worst starting Ascendancy in the entire game. You know, do campaign again, look at your ring at like level 60, and your ring level 60 is probably trash. It might be like life, a little bit of resist, and then maybe some flat damage, but that resist is offset by the reduced resist that you have to take, and the flat damage of life is like going to be nowhere close to as impactful as a regular Ascendancy node. Same with Amulet. Your Amulet, when you get to Mouse, is probably also just extremely mediocre. You don't have like any good stats in your Amulet yet. It's pretty rare. Now for late game, if we're talking about like mirror tier gear, this Ascendancy might be played, and that might is still questionable because other Ascendancies are still really strong. I think it would really die or live by the charm nodes. If the charms are extremely good, unique charms are very, very strong, then yes, you could definitely play as Ascendancy, probably would be pretty good, but only be in a late game scenario. If you want to look at some late game examples, I do have this like Deadeye bow tree here. Now, let's say for example, you have like a mirror tier breach ring, like triple flat with the highest tiers, resistance suffix, meaning attributes, right? A bonus ring like that would give you 27% more damage, and it's still 2 extra suffixes on here, and that's a pretty good Ascendancy node. But like I said, this is like a mirror tier ring. This is all perfect triple flat on a breach ring of 50% quality. You know, a more tamed ring is something you might have, could like maybe look something like this, and then they have 14% more damage. It's a lot less impressive, you know, once you don't have a perfect ring. So Ascendancy scales of currency, and yeah, it's probably only going to be good at like the near mirror tier level, like multiple hundred divines. If you are wondering, oh man, what about ingenuity? Okay, let's just face it, this belt is probably nerfed, like 100%. You know, yeah, if ingenuity is unnerved, it's not touched, and it works for this, then sure, this Ascendancy is pretty insane, because then you're getting triple rings with, you know, 80% bonus, 98% of it's fully corrupted. But I'm under the assumption that, yeah, ingenuity is probably just nerfed, because this Ascendancy would be absolutely cracked if ingenuity is still in the game without being touched. So yeah, I didn't want to talk about that real quick. But yeah, at a baseline, at mirror tier value, it is quite strong, but once again, this is not like mirror tier value where like 99% of players won't reach. For the average player, this Ascendancy is extremely weak unless ingenuity is for some reason does not touch. The one other scenario where this Ascendancy could be good is that if there's like a new unique ring, and that unique ring is just absolutely insane if you stack it. Currently, there's not like a good unique ring if you just permanently stack it. Maybe in a new patch with 100 plus uniques, that could change. We'll see, but as it stands right now, this Ascendancy is just really mediocre, assuming ingenuity is nerfed. I would not recommend to start this. Like I said, at most, it could be good in late game as a second character. As a league starter, this is definitely look like one of the worst league starters you could ever start. So anyway, that's about it. That's everything I want to talk about with the Ritualist. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. But yeah, that's about it.